During this lesson, we'll review exchange rate setup. We'll jump straight into a demonstration. Basically, we'll be looking at how to create exchange rate types, which are basically grouping of exchange rates. And then we'll take a look at how you can define your specific exchange rates. And then finally, we'll look at how you can take your exchange rate types and assign those to a specific company. And you do that through the ledger form. All right, we're going to look at how you set up exchange rates inside of Dynamics AX. So the first thing that I want to show you are, I call them the ledger parameters, but don't get them confused with the actual ledger parameters. So if you go to the navigation pane and go to General Ledger, and then under Ledger Setup, there's the Ledger form here, the Ledger menu item. So if you select that, basically that brings you into your company-specific parameters. And in here, you're going to see the chart of accounts that's assigned to this company, the fiscal calendar, etc. But the things that we're going to focus on are the exchange rate types. So when you set up a new legal entity, you're going to define your exchange rate type and your budget exchange rate type. So basically, exchange rate type is a collection of exchange rates. And when you're doing anything inside of AX minus budgeting, it's going to look at one of the types. And you can see that that one would be assigned to the exchange rate type field here, and my default exchange rate type is assigned right now. And for budgeting, we're going to use a budgeting exchange rate type. So both these types can contain the same currencies, but just different exchange rates. It's however you want to assign them. So these are the two primary things that we're looking to populate when you're implementing a legal entity. Exchange rate types are used for consolidations as well, and maybe some other places that I'm not thinking of at the time. But just note that this is what we're primarily looking to do by setting up exchange rate types and the exchange rates that are inside each type. So, all right, let's go and take a look where you set up exchange rate types. So if I go to the navigation form and go to General Ledger, and then under Currencies, you can see that there's a menu item for exchange rate types. That's the primary form that I normally go to. But if you just want to look at specific exchange rates, you can do that as well. You can see that there's a menu called Currency Exchange Rates, and you can go to that. Let's just go to exchange rate types. And when we get in here, you can see these different types. When you actually implement a legal entity, 4 types are automatically created for you: the average, the budget, the closing, and the default. In the demo data, which I'm using right now, this export and import one, we're just in there. So usually what I do when I implement is the default one's the one I work with. So if you want to look at all the different exchange rates that are assigned to this type, you can select it and then just hit the exchange rate option up on the navigation pane. So in here you can see all the different exchange rates that have been set up for this specific type. So there's the from currency and then a to currency. So you can see from USD to CAD or Canadian, it's basically we have a 102.2 exchange rate that starts on the date of 12/1/2013. So one thing that I want to focus on here is that you can actually define what we call a conversion factor, and that's just basically how things display below. So normally I like to look at things at a conversion factor of 1. So if you put the exchange rate in edit mode, you can define what your conversion factor is. So when I select 1 here, just watch the exchange rate and then the exchange rate value adjust. So now you're just looking at it at a factor of 1. All right, so you can adjust it to whatever the values are in here, and I'll just adjust it back. But basically, the other thing to know in here is that there's a from and to date, and this is how the values are displaying in the pane, the start date, exchange rate, and exchange value, the information that's showing in there. So if I bump this back in time, we'll go to like 2012 or something and see what we got. You can see that it's going to show all applicable exchange rates that fall within your from and to date. So it's just a way of you viewing the data, and it helps with performance measures. So previously, on previous versions of AX, basically when you came in this form, it loaded every exchange rate, and you can imagine over time there's tons of them. So this is just a way to get around that. So now you can just look at exchange rates for a specific date range that you want. So if you want to add a new exchange rate, it's as simple as clicking new and then defining your from currency, and I'll just pick, and just note when you create a new legal entity, all their currencies are in there. So you can just pick whatever currency it is, the to currency, and I'll just pick whatever that currency is, conversion factor, and then basically below you just start adding it in. You can say this exchange rate is valid as of 1/1/16, and the exchange rate is 50. So that's 50 AMD for every 1 AED. And if you want to change the factor to 100, go for it. Now you have just a different way of viewing the data. So that's how you set up your different, well, basically you create a type, and then you go into that type and assign all your different exchange rates within that type. And then after you're done assigning all your different exchange rates, that's when you go assign that to your actual ledger parameters here. So, well, since my parameters are set up to use the default, that exchange rate that I just created is now valid. So if I have a situation where I have a currency conversion from whatever the two currencies were that I picked, it's going to use those because they're part of the default exchange rate type. So when you're implementing a new company, just make sure that you go create your type, populate it with all your different exchange rates, and then assign it to where you want to use it, whether it's the exchange rate type or the budget exchange rate type. So, and if we go look at the budget exchange rate type, and I'm just going to left click on the hyperlink here and it'll bring me right to it, you can see that I have different values in here. There's not as many exchange rates set up, etc. So you can have as many of these as you want, and they're valid across company as well. So if I go to another company or create a new company and I just want to use the default exchange rates, right, these ones right here, or let's say this one right here, you can basically just assign this exchange rate type to another legal entity, and then it's using those exchange rates. And I believe in another lesson too, we get into the the exchange rate providers. So instead of having to manually create your exchange rates, AX actually has providers too that automate the exchange rate process. So they basically populate that table with the proper information, or do a lookup of the most up-to-date value. But anyways, if you're doing manual exchange rates, all you have to do is set up an exchange rate type, define the exchange rates within that type, and then assign it to your ledger form, which I call the ledger parameters. All right, hope that defines how you, or helps you define how you're going to set up your exchange rates.